Hello. So yes, today we have a panel on mobile security. Security is often overlooked and sometimes not well understood topic. So hopefully we can shed a little bit of light on that on the world of security for mobile developers today. So first we have Max Buzzley. He is a iOS developer and security researcher at Blue Box Security, and also the co-founder of Cocoa Heads Ukraine. And we have Cristiano Betta, who is a developer advocate at a company, Braintree, who helps businesses accept credit card payments. And next to him, we have Nikolai Alenkov, oh, I know I'm going to screw it up. I won't even say the company name. I'll leave it to you. A security researcher and also the author of the Android Security Internals book. And down at the end there, we have Eric Lafortune, who is the creator of ProGuard and is currently at GuardSquare, correct? Working on ProGuard and DexGuard. So to start things off, this last year, we've seen, it seems, increasing security news and big headlines about this stuff. So just to kind of get a general feel, where do you guys see the mobile security landscape right now? Do you think things are getting better or worse?
As I see the last year from iOS side, it's became much better. So Apple adds much more restrictions, including the security ones, and I see a good area of development of mobile obfuscators. It was in comparing a few years ago, it was less of them, but right now I feel it's like it add a good strong point, a strong layer of protection, so it became better.
Yeah, so I'm not quite a mobile developer, but the thing that we've noticed is that people are taking it more serious. And that's probably the biggest kind of change that we've seen in the last few years, is that, you know, people, especially on our side, you know, there's been quite a few credit card frauds, leaks across different big companies that we weren't involved with, they're starting to realize that they need to take this stuff serious. And the same is happening in the mobile space. So
it's for Android or something. I think it's only getting better. Oh, okay, thanks. Even like on the default features, Google is adding there's better security for the average user, and there's some people who are working on like really specialized stuff. If you're going in a hostile environment, like undercover or whatever, foreign country, and you can be in life can depend on like what's on your mobile device. There are people working like serious stuff on this front also. So it's definitely getting better compared to like last year or the year before.
Okay. So I agree that there's more effort going into security nowadays. So people are becoming aware of it. Developers are becoming aware of it. They're learning about it. But my impression is that things will get worse, actually. So in that sense, I disagree. Because a whole lot of new developments are happening. People are jumping on mobile, coming from all kinds of different kinds of backgrounds, and they don't necessarily have the experience. They try to push applications out without taking security into considerations, because it's just an afterthought and they don't have any time anymore. So there's a lot more work to be done to educate developers on the one hand. You're here, that's a good start. But also to maybe enforce more security. And there's work there, but I think devices are getting more diverse. More security holes are out there and not being patched. There's the Internet of Things coming up, and I think it will be pretty bad.
Yeah, I think that's there's some great points here, right? That we see a lot of these improvements happening at the system level, right, and the manufacturer level. Apple and Google obviously paying very close attention to where they should be making these iterative improvements. And to Eric's point, on the development side, right, things can get missed. So I guess my next question for you guys is, do you see themes or trends in things that are commonly forgotten or commonly overlooked when it comes to security?
Overlooked? Well, there's so much you have to be aware of that doesn't come naturally when you're developing an application. So secure communication seems like an obvious thing, but it's much easier not to communicate securely. And it's easier for users as well. So that's just one example, but it goes to many levels, I think. Yeah.
Nikolai, are there any, on Android, are there any particular things that you think get missed a lot?
Well, what he said is definitely like one thing. SSL, like validating certificates and things like that. It's complicated by design. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, and it requires some thinking. So I think if you're like one developer, one main company, whatever, it can be hard. But the future is probably for bigger companies. You have the developers, and then you have your red team or whatever who are trying to break your stuff before you release it, so that these things don't get out in production. So it's definitely more and more specialization will be probably the answer. But if you're like a single developer, it just might get unwieldy. So either you put more time into it, or you just pay somebody to do it for you. So.
Yeah, I can add. The problem is that usually developers rely on well-known or public security protection layers, but forgot about a simplest one, and all the protection layers could be easily bypassed. So that's a very common problem that I see with mobile applications.
So do you think that there's a balance to be struck? So for users, it's commonly said that security is a balance of security and convenience, right? You can make something extremely secure, but if it's frustrating to use, it's not much good for anybody. Do you think there's a similar balance for developers to find? And do you have any suggestions for how for their users?
Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to protect. If you're trying to protect your own algorithm, it makes sense to add a lot of obfuscation on it to hide it. Or it's like sensitive user data is a banking info. Yes, make sure to add a few layers of protection, a few layers of encryption. So it does not make sense to add encryption where it's not needed. And I see applications that add encryption like everywhere, but it's not effective. It's just a slowdown.
So I actually come from a web background, and I've been trying to play with mobile quite a few times, and I'm quite versed in writing iOS apps. But the thing that amazes me still is that, like on the website, we've gone through iterations of kind of how we build apps, to the point where we almost exclusively use frameworks, and these frameworks are, they're painful, and you might know them. They're either Django or Rails or whatever else you're using in the background. And they often come into the news because they have exploits, right? You think that's a bad thing. It's like, no, that's a good thing. Because basically what happens there is that, these frameworks, they've gone through like 10 years of iterations where they've refined the way the security works. They've refined and set standards as to how we build apps. And I think, and I'm just making a guess here, I think the real future of like mobile apps and mobile security is for these kind of standards to come alive, for these kind of frameworks to come alive. Because as a small developer, you do not have the time to reinvent the wheel every time you build something new. But if we can all together rely on frameworks that we work on together, then we're going to get actual security. And of course, with that belongs the build tools and everything to make sure that we, We actually check for the security holes. We actually check for kind of all the little tick boxes that we need to do before we actually ship something. But just to take a step back, one of the most eye-opening things I've ever had the pleasure to do was to have a pen test done on one of my sites. And I thought I was pretty good at this, and then he found like 50 exploits just in one site. If you ever have a client that has the budget and you can convince them to do something similar to your mobile app, just to hire somebody else to break it, do it. Because it's not only good for your client, but you will become a better developer at it. Because you will get your eyes opened the way you think, like, holy crap, I didn't even know that. I didn't know you could do that. So that's my advice to somebody trying to kind of get into that.
So definitely more should be done on the framework, or if you want a platform side, because if you say something like really simple, like encrypt a file, and it's actually quite hard to do it correctly, because you have to use the right algorithm and then think how to protect your key, and then you have to check for modifications, because even if it's encrypted, it can still be modified. And if you want to do these things with the APIs that we have now, like the APIs are very basic. There's like encrypt and check and generate key. And how do you combine these to make it right? I mean, it's unless you've read at least a couple of books on cryptography, you will get it wrong the first time. And so the future is definitely on the platform side, more high-level, easy-to-use APIs for encryption or whatever, anything, and maybe third-party frameworks, which are some of them, like especially for the visual things like widgets and stuff. There is a lot of third-party stuff, but for the security or lower-level stuff, not so many. There's like SQL Cipher, and that's it basically. There is a few libraries that you can use, but there is still a lot of room for improvement there. So you don't have to put so much time and reinvent everything as a one-man developer, or even as a company. So a lot of space for improvement yet.
You were asking about a balance. I don't think there's that much of a balance to be found between, for instance, having this much time spent on a beautiful design, this much time spent on a nice implementation, and this much time spent on security. You have to get the security right, otherwise it doesn't work. But then there's this balance between what do you want to protect, how important is it, what you're working with, data from your users, money from your users, your own reputation, how important is all of that, and you have to balance that against how much effort you spend on security. So in some cases it might not be that important, the score of your game, but in other instances it might be very important, and then there's no compromise there.
I just can add that be very careful with reinventing a wheel, with implementing your own crypto, because you can choose the very strong crypto algorithm, but do some basic mistake, and it could be bypassed very, very easily. So better rely on frameworks that already provided by Apple or Google than reinvent your own. Or just make sure you know what you are doing.
So an example talking about that comes to mind was Apple's go-to-fail bug that they had in their implementation of SSL and TLS. And one of the things I found interesting about that is the bug was in code that they had open sourced. And so they got a lot of scrutiny for it, but it was something that nobody else had noticed. Do you think if there's an increased reliance, or developers looking to use these third-party frameworks or tools to make things more secure, are there contributions that developers can be making to drive those tools forward?
I know the open source Apple.com is the first source for all the exploit makers, and so they can find some vulnerabilities but never publish them, because they can use them in future jailbreaks and so on. So yeah, I think it can help that you open source your stuff, but firstly the hackers will check it, not the security analysts. So you can understand that there are two sides of medal.
I'm not sure what you're saying exactly, but I think the problem probably more lies with the fact that Apple's stuff isn't fully open source, right? If Apple would fully kind of embrace open source within all of the libraries and frameworks they deploy, people would be looking at it and people would be contributing and people would be updating it and patching it, etc. I think the problem, I don't know the exact bug here, but do I understand it wasn't patched immediately?
It was patched relatively quickly after somebody noticed it.
Yeah. Well, that's good then, right? Somebody found it.
I saw a few examples when the patches provide much faster from a jailbreak community than the officials from Apple.
Yes.
Again, that's because it's not officially open source.
Apple open source only like a kernel. This is all.
Just speaking from my little corner of the world, ProGuard is an open source project, and it's an obfuscator also, but it can be open source because it only removes information from the application, so it doesn't try to hide code by applying techniques that you could reverse engineer by looking at the source code. So it only removes non-essential information. And that has helped me a lot, it being open source, because you get so much feedback from everyone using it. And people are picking it up easily. They can just give it a try and see if it works. That's different from our commercial product, DexGuard, which uses techniques that necessarily have to be closed source to be effective to some extent. It's just one tiny aspect of security, but that's my experience.
So, I think ProGuard and DexGuard are great examples of kind of, third-party tools that developers can be utilizing to increase the security of their apps, and in that case, add obfuscation to their code to make it more difficult to reverse engineer. Do you guys have any recommendation or suggestions for other tools for any other platforms or services that developers might look to integrate into their own projects?
As for me, the one of the best open source project last time was LLVM obfuscator. So from one side, it is open sourced, so the skilled attacker knows the exact algorithms what is used for obfuscating stuff. But as another side, that much more developers start to obfuscate their code. So it's adds some balance between a problem. And skilled developers can add some own feature or change the algorithms in this open source obfuscator. As for me, it's like a big step forward from like a iOS point of view, because for Android it's much more obfuscators.
Well, of course, there's one aspect is obfuscation, like protecting your code, and another aspect is making sure it's correct in the first place. So there is, I don't think there's too much development, but static analysis before you release your stuff. A lot of things can be caught at this stage, especially some simple things like, I don't know, not checking SSL certificates or using ECB mode for whenever encryption, which is generally a bad idea. So some of those things have been integrated in the Android's lint tool. So it does flag some security problems. So please do not ignore them. If you're not sure what it means, ask somebody. And I think there will be more commercial and open source tools for static analysis and especially security checks in the future. So just look at this space as well, not just for obfuscation and hiding your code, but also for checking it in the first place.
And in the Android world, there are lots of, or at least a series of libraries that can help you write secure applications. For SQL, you mentioned one. There are a couple of SQL Cipher, yeah. There are a number of other ones, the names of which escape me now, but you should look into those because they do the right thing and they help you writing your own application securely.
Do you guys think that there's going to be, I mean, we look at, and Eric kind of touched on this earlier, we have this Internet of Things, right? We see things like mobile payments really becoming more popular and people using their devices for more and more stuff. Would you guys say that developers have a responsibility to their users? I mean, I guess developers don't always necessarily go into projects expecting or intending to have personal data or information, but increasingly that seems to be more the case. Is there a responsibility there for developers not to protect their own IP, but their users and data as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Very simple. I mean, you spend how much money on your app, on your product? Yes, and I know a lot of you do not have budget for like marketing or PR. Just imagine how much negative marketing PR you get once your data gets lost. But on that note, like the thing to consider there, and this is the same thing with the frameworks, is like offload that responsibility, right? Offload that responsibility of who has the responsibility to kind of think about these things. When you're thinking about frameworks, you're basically offloading kind of the responsibility to kind of make sure that you have a secure framework. Do your research into which frameworks, which libraries you use so that you know that these are well respected and keep them up to date. But the same thing goes with like, processing payments. Like if you want to process payments, use something like Braintree, because we will tell you how to do payments in a way that is secure so that you're not storing everybody's credit card details in the SQL database on the phone, right? We don't want that to happen. We'll make sure that we'll teach you how to do this stuff right. The same thing goes for like login data. The reason why companies like Parse have been so popular is because they offload that responsibility. If you don't know how to do it right, rely on somebody else. So
I was going to say that I think that's a good point. Do you guys have other suggestions? I mean, like for Android security, of course, Nikolai, there's your book that people can check out. Do you guys have specific resources or examples that you would recommend developers look into if they're, looking to enhance security of their products and they're not really sure where to start? What are some good places they can look to?
For Android, Nikolai's book is excellent, I think. It's really from the ground up. It explains whatever is happening on the Android platform to build secure applications, but also from the ground up. More practically, maybe if you're a developer, the Android Security Cookbook by Scott Alexander Bound is quite nice. So that's my recommendation.
And another thing is, there's of course, if you have the data, you need to secure it. But I think people should think in the first place, do we actually need to store this? Or do we need to make this shareable or viewable? Because, especially on Android, you have intents, you can share between applications, you can do all this cool stuff. But do you really need to make the email address of your users shareable via Twitter or whatever? Do you really need to store I don't know, authentication tokens in shared preferences and things like that? So a lot of times, it's more convenient if you store it, but most people wouldn't care if you didn't store it. So just there's this balance of how much data you need to keep. Before thinking about how to secure it, just think about, do you really need to save this or send this over the network? And the less you store and the less you send, the better. So
I can add that firstly you should check the Apple iOS security guide just to make sure that which APIs are already provided by Apple for not reinventing a wheel. So it's a good to start from iOS security, check Apple guide.
So I know Nikolai got asked this yesterday and answered it very diplomatically, but I'm going to poke the fire a little bit here. Which platform do you guys think is best for security?
Paper in a safe.
Okay, it depends how much security you want. Of course, the best thing is, as I said before, if you can get away without saying something, don't say it. Even if you're talking to people, like usually you have like a shared context. If you're like friends or family, you can talk about something without mentioning it, like you know what both of you are talking about. So without mentioning names and places, you can still communicate. So it's pretty similar in the mobile world. But anyway, as for platforms, probably the most secure right now is Windows Phone. Simply because there is not so much research into it, and people are not sure how exactly it works and what is happening. And actually, on a more serious note, Microsoft has been working on this for a long, long time. And in desktop systems, Windows is the most secure platform right now. And I think that they will do implement some of this in Windows Phone as well. And between Apple and Android, there's different worlds. Apple has had more time to evolve. They have like specific hardware. On Android, you have all those different hardware implementations. So, but still, if you have like the latest iPhone 6 and the latest Nexus 6, I think it's about the same. Apple has the advantage of they have the dedicated crypto hardware. They have code signature for binaries, which is not there on Android. You have code signature for APKs, but not for libraries, not for jars. So this is kind of a little bit of a problem, but it will get better with things like verified boot and the Verity, where you cannot modify the system partition at all, and then it won't matter so much. But right now, there's a lot more security checks in Apple than in Android. So
it's actually interesting you're talking about Windows Phone, because Windows Phone is going away. It's going to be Windows 10 completely, and Windows actually, they announced that they're going to have the Windows IoT platform, so you can run Windows 10 on your IoT devices, or at least components of Windows 10 on your IoT devices, like the BeagleBone and the Raspberry Pi 2 will support Windows 10. And actually going back to what you said earlier is like, how does that IoT play a part in this? And my initial thought was like, well, at the moment, all of these IoT devices, they're all running different operating systems. They're all running different platforms. If Windows 10 is popular on this platform, which I doubt, but if it is, it has an opportunity to get to the size of what we had with Windows 95, right? And Windows XP, where it was on billions of devices, potentially even more, which means that one exploit will, not just affect your computers, but every little piece of IoT that's around your house. That's an interesting, it might be secure right now, but I wouldn't put my money on it.
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know what are Microsoft's plans for the IoT, but I guess they will try to get it running everywhere, especially since they kind of missed the whole mobile thing for the last 5 or how many years. But still, I mean, it's a very immature platform, and unless they do something completely stupid in the future, it should be reasonably secure. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. I can add that both platforms provide all the possibilities to create a good and strongly secured software. I mean, I'm not comparing two platforms, but you can create security software on iOS and Android. There are no one platform limitations. Yeah.
So moving back a little bit towards, I guess, away from the platform side of things to the developer side of things, as developers are implementing potentially new security features or new security options for users, I think one of the things that can suffer is ease of design, right? So sometimes you have to add user-facing options that can add maybe complexity or confusion to things. I guess, are there any examples that you guys can think of like bad security design from a user perspective that developers should try to avoid or look out for?
If you want to see a whole list of them on the web, you should come to my talk later on. But not for mobile, sorry.
One very, very simple thing is passwords. Everybody hates passwords, but especially for things like Twitter and Google and Facebook and whatnot, they provide the APIs so you can get a token and you don't have to save the user password. But still there are some applications which ask for your email and your Gmail password, and they store it in plain text on the device. So again, if you can get away without storing the password, don't store it. They're usually a better way, and even you don't want to ask the user to enter their password every time, but still storing it in the device is kind of not a good thing to do. And in most cases, there are ways to get a token or something else. So it's amazing that people are still doing this in 2015.
To be honest, I think from a user perspective, read up on passwords. There's a lot of documents, there's a lot of articles out there that explain how to do this stuff right, OAuth, OAuth2, all this stuff. Do a bit of interest on your own behalf into reading, both the psychology element of it and kind of the security element of it, because a lot of these things they're as much technical as they are social factors. I have my bank. They have a mobile app, and every time I need to log in, every time I open the app, it just completely resets, and I need to log in fully with my username and password, etc. Which means that I do not use a random password, which I do for every other website every other app that I'm on. It means that I actually use a password that I remember. And I can tell you, my password is pretty good, but the average user of my bank, I can tell you that they're using something pretty straightforward, right? Because they need to remember it. And the point is, if somebody needs to remember your password for your app, right? And if you want to reach a lot of users, including the people who are not as tech savvy as we are, they're going to write it down somewhere, right? So think about these kind of things. Like, do you really need to get somebody to sign up with a username and password? Probably not. Just use Twitter, use Facebook, use LinkedIn. Nobody uses LinkedIn, but like, use one of the identity providers that you can use. But again, don't reinvent the wheel. And quite often, if you don't reinvent the wheel, you're actually making the life for your user also easier.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So we're getting down, we've got a little more than 10 minutes left here. So let's, if you guys have some questions that you'd like to ask these guys, let's spend the rest of the time doing that. Somebody's got to have a question about security. Come on.
All the way in the back.
Hey, I have a question. So you told us if you don't know how to exploit your own code, let's pay somebody to do it and to teach you. But where can I find resources to teach myself how to exploit my own code? So of course I know how I implemented it, but on the other hand, I'm not a low-level guy, but more of a front-end developer. Still, I would like to have some security when I push out my code, that it's kind of secure, or it's as secure as I can make it from my point. Is there any starting point where I can start with the knowledge?
What platform are you developing for?
Mostly iOS. But I think it's not only for the platform, but for a general way. When I implement my backend with Node.js and at this current state, I still need some knowledge how to exploit it, probably.
Or
Yeah, that's a good question. I have not seen like a good list on the web, so I've decided to create my own. You can check like my previous talk from a previous year that I've mentioned from my point of view must have security features that you should implement into your application. And if you want to like go deeper, try Erksan for protecting. It is from a code protection point of view, but they are really good.
To me, from what I can see, there's two kind of security elements in here. There's the security on the device, right? It's, you know, if I have access to your device, can I get access to your app? And can I, you know, if I have the app installed, can I reverse engineer it? Can I figure out what your keys are, etc.? Honestly, I don't know who you would look at for that, but there's a lot of things, a lot of hacks you can do just by sniffing the network, just by looking at the network traffic as soon as the data leaves your device. And for that, you probably want to start looking at a pen tester. That's kind of the word you need to find. There's a lot of contractors that do this work. They'll just take your app and they'll sniff the network and they'll figure out if they can figure out the keys from your API. If you're not encrypting your network data, they can figure everything out. If you're not signing your SSL certificates, they can sniff it out. They're pretty good at this stuff. So if you, that's as far as I know. I don't know what kind of the terminology would be to look at that from an on-device perspective.
in my experience, conferences are often a good starting point. Looking at, for instance, the DroidCon conference, almost every year there is a session on hacking an app, and it's always packed. And in half an hour they show hands-on how you can hack an app, make some changes, look what's going on inside. And if you can't go to those conferences, you can find the videos or presentations online. So that's a good starting point in my experience.
I don't know about iOS, but at least for Android, there is a bunch of services that do static analysis as a service. So basically, you upload your APK, and they give you a list of potential problems and security problems, and just regular coding problems grouped with different levels. So you can use one of these. It should be like a relatively cheap way to assess the overall security. And I think there are a bunch of, again, I don't know about iOS, but secure coding guidelines, and one of them is like 500 pages long. You can download it for free, so this would be a good start also.
I can add that in Bluebox we are planning to release later this year an SDK for developers, so which implemented a lot of security checks like debugger detections, like checksum detection, and so on and so on. So I haven't mentioned it earlier, but yeah, you can trial it maybe in a half a year. Bluebox.
Hello. I'm an Android user, sadly. I'm feeling really annoyed. Like, I really like the Android community and so on at the beginning, but I'm feeling really annoyed lately because, you as an Android user, you are supposed to be raped. You are going to install an application, and you've been talking a lot about security in terms of technology, in terms of apps. But I'm wondering how we users can secure ourselves from companies to rape us. Because every time I install an application, I know that they are doing things and they are taking a lot of data from me. I know that when you install the application, they ask you for the permissions, but most of the people skip that. They don't care. They just want to install whatever. And then the company is like taking all your data. They know everything about you. And I wonder, how can we become safer in that respect? How can we change the community and make the ecosystem a bit healthier?
The solution would be to just, is this on? The solution would be to just become an angry developer.
I'm an Android developer.
No, angry developer.
I'm an angry developer.
I mean,
too.
you need, like, there's many countries, they have these kind of digital rights groups. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's one here, but I know there's in the US, it's EFF. In England, it's Open Rights Group. In the Netherlands, it's like, shit, I forgot which one it was. Most countries have these kind of things, and they are very good at kind of trying to get the word out to consumers, but also get the word out to politicians about these kind of things. And sadly, that is the way we're going to have to go with this kind of stuff. It's just, as a community, we need to be angry about this kind of stuff.
But sorry.
Because it sucks. It sucks that we're not going to change. We're not going to change the average user. We're not going to change their understanding of why the app is asking for 1 million permissions. They're just going to click OK. But the thing is that we're going to have to take up arms and just get angry about it. And this works. It's worked with various other security-related issues. It's worked with like Facebook permissions with the apps. I don't know if you remember that, the early days. That was absolutely insane, and people just got angry about it, and were angry about it online. And Facebook has since then done a whole lot of work to make their permissions a lot more understandable, and they actually punish people who take the piss, right? Google's not punishing people for taking the piss. And
don't you think the same as parents have to teach kids how to behave, and the kids are gonna learn from the parents? The thing is, like, most of the developers that they create applications, for example, for Android, they learn from Google, and Google is the biggest raper.
I'd refrain from using that word probably as much as you do, but just saying. But yes. But it's easier to, it's probably easier to teach, to get the app makers to change the way they behave than to get how many billion users educated. Just saying.
Until that time comes, until paradise comes, the truth is very tough, I think. Don't use those apps. Don't use Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+. I don't.
One more question. What is your point of view on using biometrics in mobile devices? I mean, is it secure to store your fingerprints, use Touch ID, or other devices on Android?
So yeah, it is secure from iOS perspective, because they say that they are not stored it in some software layer, so it could be accessible only by hardware. But you need to make sure that the environment you are running is trustable, because check for jailbreaks and so on and so on and so on. So do not store a biometric for untrustable environment.
The thing is, biometrics, the way they're used right now, both on iOS but also on different devices, is they're not used as primary identification methods, right? You authenticate with something, you get a key that is specific to your device, and then what happens is your fingerprint, or the data associated with your fingerprint, is used as a key to then encrypt that token on your machine, which means that that token is tied to that device, and it's more of a convenient way to kind of slightly secure that token on your device and unlock it with your fingerprint, with your eyes, with your heartbeat, whatever, right? And you need to understand that that's what it's for. That's what it's good for. It's good as I've already skipped through I've already logged in with my email address and my password. I've already got the text message and gone through the two-factor authentication, and oh, by the way, I've also had a phone call to confirm that I'm actually who I am, right? I've gone through all the hoops to confirm who I am. Now on this device, there is a token, and we don't want me to go through those hoops every time I want to log in or use the app. So instead, what we're doing is we're encrypting it with a fingerprint. It's good for that, as long as the fingerprint doesn't leave the device. But even then, like, if you want to increase the security, use more than one biometric, right? Use 2 fingers, use 3 fingers. Sadly, on iOS, you can't do that yet, but that's the way we will increase that.
I have a question. There are so many ways now to hack an app, and so many methods, and sometimes technologies are failing, like the recent Poodle on SSL. Is it still worth to write automated security tests? What do you think about it?
the automated pen testing applications that run on, for iOS, they run on a jailbroken environment and just trying to put everything to a log, put like passwords, pin codes, and so on, so on, so on. So before releasing, try to use like most well-known pen testing tweaks. There are like 2 or 3 of them, and you can find a lot of security holes, like storing this one, like storing a password as a string or so.
I mean, it's always like a trade-off, but you should at least take care of the the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that is can broken in like a minute, or it's like, oh, this guy is storing the key here. Okay, he's stupid. I just hacked him. You don't want to be there. But of course, if somebody is targeting your app specifically, you either you live with it or you spend more time and money to make it more secure. So it's just a trade-off there.
Hello, I have one question. Do you think that cloud solutions for mobile apps are secure for the content, for people content?
So
as a provider, storage provider, for example.
So you're asking if cloud storage is a secure solution for developers to use to store user content?
Yes, I mean, it depends on the implementation. So, as I mentioned before, any SSL connection could be like man in the midlet and could be sniffed. So, in general, yes, but it depends on your security implementation on a client.
So you able to trust external solution to trust this solution as a secure, yes?
Yeah, but make sure that it is a trustable source. Make sure that they are like a property signed. So do some additional checks that it is your friend.
Again, don't store the stuff you don't want somebody to see. Like if it's like I don't know, incriminating pictures or documents you got from your company because you were angry at them, don't put it in Google Drive and places like this, because eventually it will get out. So depending what you want to store, just have to first think about it and then store it. You can, of course, encrypt it on the client and do whatever, but still, it's better to not store it than to store it.
I really like the comment about the Windows Phone. I feel the same, that this is in fact the most secure system right now. My question is, why Google with Android doesn't implement solution or maybe feature that prevents the apps from stealing our data? It can be done. It's done pretty good on iOS. It's done pretty good on Windows Phone. Why Google doesn't do that?
I don't know why Google doesn't do it, but my guess is for mostly backward compatibility, because Android started with these permissions by default, and if you change it now, people will get confused and things will be crazy. So it might change in the future. I think there is some code about optional permissions in the platform. It's not being used yet, but the code is there. It might get supported in the future. It might not. But I think one of the reasons is they just don't want to break things for users and change it all of a sudden. I don't know why. What is the direction they're heading? But it's mostly inertia, I think.
Okay, but due to nature of the Android and that because it's open source, there is a lot of solutions on market that makes the application that doesn't allow application to steal our data. Is there any solution that you can say with confidence that this is the good one? If you have Android, you should use it. It makes your personally safer.
Well, the thing is, those things are at the platform level. So unless you're using like a custom ROM or something like this, you can generally cannot do anything about it. One of the most widely used is the one in cyanogen mode, like what is it called, privacy guard or something. You can use this. Of course, there is again a trade-off to use custom ROM. You have to unlock your bootloader, which is again a potential security hole. So you have to kind of think about it. But this is one good implementation is the one in cyanogen mode. So if you care about these things, you can look into it. But again, make sure you relog the bootloader after reinstall a custom ROM, and there is some trade-off in there as well.
I think that's the wrong solution to the problem, though, in my eyes, because that protects us geeks from our data getting stolen, but it doesn't protect the average Joe from their data getting stolen. Again, like I said, we need to become more angry about this stuff, right? We need to become more angry. We need to shame and blame the apps that are just taking the piss there. But it's also a policy thing, right? It's a policy thing, like the fact that Google is even allowing me to write an app like that and ship it and get away with it. That's a problem too. I know we all don't like, the application process of apps on iOS, but, one of the things they do is make sure that apps are not too excessive, and they occasionally do reject apps because they are too excessive in wanting data that they don't need.
Great. I think we've gone a few minutes over at this point, so thank you guys for hanging around. I want to thank everybody on the panel. If you guys are interested in more, Cristiano has a talk after lunch, I believe, right? And you missed out on the other three guys' talks, unless you went, in which case, good call. But those recordings should be up available later, and I think everyone's going to be around the conference the rest of the day. So feel free to find any of them and bug them. Thank you, guys.